Skitolalians, Jeff Weinberger coming at you here with a new guitar tutorial. Today I'd like to talk about thirds, sixths, and tenths. It's a subject otherwise known as intervals, and intervals are simply the space from one note to another note, an interval. And another name for this is double stops. On the guitar sometimes we play two notes together at the same time. It's not quite a chord, it's not just a single note, it's in between. It's called a double stop. And that term is derived from a violin technique, from way back, classical violin technique, double stops. So that first example you heard me play, that was El Paso. Marty Robbins played that song, I think it was way back in 1959, and had a huge hit with it. I remember it as a kid, when I was a kid in the 60s. My parents had that record in their collection. And Grady Martin was the name of the guitar player that played beautiful, beautiful parts. I think he did it on a classical guitar on a nylon string, but for our purposes today I have my trusty Strat here. So those were thirds that you heard me playing there when I went. Two notes at the same time. And I'll show you how to play that later. Another very famous example, which I'm sure you'll recognize, is this one, using thirds. Everyone knows that one, Brown Eyed Girl by Van Morrison from the 70s. And so that, I think it was the 70s, it might have been the late 60s, but regardless of what era that came from, everyone knows it. That's such a famous guitar lick. And that also is thirds, two notes at the same time. So thirds tend to be closer. They are closer. They are notes that are only apart by three notes, hence the name thirds. So I played the note G, this is my B string's 8th fret, and I played the note B, which is my E string 7th fret. You play those two together, and you get a third. G and B are three notes apart. G, A, B. Three notes. It's a third. Then A and C are three notes apart. A at the 10th fret of the B string. C at the 8th fret of the high E string. Those are thirds also. So thirds on that set of strings have two different shapes. You have a major third, which is, for instance, the 8th fret and the 7th fret. Two frets right next to each other. And then you have thirds like this, a minor third, which are two frets apart. You have a fret in between. One note at the 10th fret, one note at the 8th fret. So either two frets right next to each other, or apart by a fret. Another famous place that you hear thirds is the mariachi trumpet intro of Ring of Fire, Johnny Cash. Everyone knows that one too. So there's plenty of famous licks out there. We won't have time to do them all. In fact, I am going to split this video into two parts because there are so many examples to go over. But just staying on the subject of thirds, we could have multiple videos since that's a very common interval. But let's move on to sixths. I want to first play you something that uses sixths, and I'm sure you're going to recognize this, but let's check it out. That was Soul Man, and Steve Cropper was the guitar player on that session. That was Sam and Dave. Steve Cropper played on many sessions. He was a great guitar player, still is, and a lot of his work has double stops like that. He was a really tasty player, and that particular song, Soul Man, uses sixths. Another example of sixths would be Janis Joplin, Another Piece of My Heart. The guitar player on that goes like this. He goes... Let me remember the key though. Actually, it's in this key. When Janis Joplin's going, come on, come on. And then they get into the verse after that big build-up in the intro. Another one is Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater. It ain't me, I ain't no senator's son. That song by Creedence Clearwater, late 60s, Vietnam era. Fortunate Son, that's got sixths in it. There's some other examples I'll play for you later, some Beatles things. We'll get into tenths. Tenths are a really beautiful interval, used a lot by the Beatles, used by Bach, and the example I'll play for you in the second half is by Steely Dan. So these are really nice things to know how to do. Let's look a little more in depth at thirds, and let's look specifically at, say, Brown Eyed Girl. Let's use Brown Eyed Girl as our example. So we are playing the 8th fret and the 7th fret. 8th fret on our B, 7th fret on our E, and you strum them together, and voila, you get thirds. It's a beautiful sound. It's almost like two people singing in harmony. It's almost like Simon and Garfunkel, or Phil and Don Everly, or Paul McCartney and John Lennon. A lot of vocal music that's harmonized is in thirds. Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and stuff like that. So one thing you can do is strum them with your pick down like that, but you can also use a technique called pick and fingers, where you pick with your pick the the B string, and with your middle finger of your right hand pluck the E string. That's a cool way to do it too, pick and fingers. It's a more percussive sound, and you get a little nail in there too. And then if you want, you could just simply finger pick them. You could use your thumb and your finger and just not use a pick at all. And that is actually how I prefer to play it. If I were playing this song at a wedding or in a band at some function where this song was requested, I'd probably use my fingers to play that. And then I'd just grab my pick to strum the chords of the song. But yeah, I like this sound the best. Pure fingers, but pick and fingers. Very percussive, very staccato, and then strumming. If you don't feel like messing with pick and fingers or getting rid of your pick and then bringing your pick back in, if you just want to do the no-nonsense version, just strum it with your pick. Alright, so we talked about the first one. The second one was frets 10 and 8. Then we have frets 12 and 10. And then we have frets 13 and 12. So in a row, that goes. So you have those three. And then the next set, 13 and 12, is where it starts. 15 and 13. 17 and 15. So it's kind of like three little double stops, followed by three other double stops. And then same thing, starting at the 12th. You started at the 7th and did that series. And then you start at the 12th. Do that again at the 7th. And you just do a D chord. Or you do this D chord. At the 5th fret, that's 7, 7, 5, starting on the G string. If you want to be really accurate, I think that's what the guitar player on the record did. Alright, Talalians, there's a very quick crash course in thirds, sixths, and tenths. We'll have a part 2 of this where I will go over some of the other songs I mentioned, some Chuck Berry. We're going to have actually a couple of Chuck Berry songs. And we'll get into Soul Man in more depth, Piece of My Heart, King of the World by Steely Dan. Maybe we'll even learn that thing I played at the beginning, El Paso. That'll be fun. So I hope you get Talalians. Take care. Be sure to subscribe, be sure to like, be sure to click the notify bell, be sure to share, and look for tabs on my Patreon, which, of course, I'm going to link to down below. And you can see all of this written out in glorious tabs, so there's no guessing as to which string and which fret and which finger. Alright, get Talalians. Take care. Bye-bye. See you in part 2.